Hello everyone, greetings from the Servant of Nero, AJ here with the nautically inclined among the factions of Warmachine. While there are a few nations with prominent navies, only one genuinely relies on it, while another two view their navies in a more balanced manner, and a further two nations have navies that are more vestigial parts of their armies than independent branches of their armed forces. One fleet, though, is not overtly affiliated to any nation, though they occasionally take a side, even if, admittedly, it's almost always on the side of those who don't take their orders from necromancers and a dragon. Thus, herein will be presented the Pirates of the Broken Coast subfaction of the Mercenaries, and the minions of Toruk, the Dragonfather. In a slight change from standard operating procedure, though, the minor faction will be coming first. Being one of the premier seafaring nations, Ord has a proud naval tradition. However, its proximity to Cryx, as well as numerous unsavoury places that indulge activities of a questionable legality, means that Ord also has a proud tradition of privateering, that expanded down the length of the coast of western Immoren, particularly Signar. However, what separates Ordic pirates from their counterparts across the Meredius is, along with the tacit approval of their king no less, the Talion Charter, a set of guidelines, shall we say, that binds all the signatories and their crews to a particular code of conduct and an overriding goal amongst themselves. Though the Talion Charter was drawn up by Captain Shea, a native of Mercia in southern Signar, as a direct reference to the captain and crew of the titular ship, the Talion, the Charter, like their on-land equivalents, was expanded to include other mercenary captains and their crews, particularly those of Captain Montador and Calamitas, and as well as the rest of his squadron, which includes Fiona the Black in command of the Ill Fortune. As one would expect of pirates, their organisation is a somewhat haphazard affair, and most of the ships or flotillas conduct their own piratical business independently of the others, with little more than cursory cooperation among the respective commanders. Each has their own hunting grounds, with Shea preying on Mercarian League shipping and Montador plying his trade along the western coast of Immoren, though occasionally he finds within himself an honest sense of duty to the country of his birth and chases off encroaching Cryxian raiders and the less savoury of his rival pirate captains. And Calamitas is nothing if not a fearsome ship, with a high freeboard bristling with a nigh and unparalleled broadside complemented by a bevy of gun turrets and cupolas on the top deck. Montador is aptly nicknamed Broadside's Bart, as much for the weight of shot the Calamitas can spew out in a single volley as his own predilection towards firing broadsides, whether from his ship or his battle group when his contracts take him ashore. But while Montador skirts the line that separates privateer from pirate, Shea is more overtly the outlaw, forced to the pirate life by an outrageous bounty placed on his head by the League thanks to his part in the mutiny on the League's flagship the Exeter before its demise. Nonetheless, the crews of each captain show great loyalty, and the crews of both the Calamitas and the Talion have served under Montador and Shea for many years, that their ships are the only home that most would admit. Thus, aboard each ship, their respective hierarchies follow almost identical lines, with titles for various ranks, but the ranks being the same across each crew. Seniormost are the captains, unsurprisingly, followed by the sailing master, master gunner, and boatswain, as the most important officers, followed by the quartermaster, master-at-arms, carpenter, ship's pilot, and other officers who round out the captain's council, of sorts. Deckhands and regular sailors make the bulk of the crew, who perform functions and maintenance of the ship under the direction of the officers, while at the very bottom are the swabs, inexperienced or new crew freshly pressed into service. The occasional officer here or there has special dispensation due to certain circumstances, such as John Rockbottom, who has no official rank aboard the Talion, but is treated almost equal in status to Hawk, the first mate, thanks to being the co-owner of the ship itself, and effectively the crew's paymaster. The crews themselves cut a colourful collection of cutthroats and comport themselves with the expected characteristics, and they are equally welcome of human, Trollkin, dwarf, or any other race, even Gobber. Some are enthusiastic to the point of nigh religious zeal in pressing unfortunates into a crew's ranks. It's not unknown for roving bands of pressgangers to wander amidst the flying gunfire of an ongoing skirmish and press whoever is unlucky to be close enough to their truncheons. These poor grunts usually wind up shy of anything of value they once had, having acquired in its place overnight a few miles of open water and a bunch of new sea dog colleagues. But they adapt well enough, if only because they must. Sometimes, however, ships can end up taking on stranger passengers, but provided that they can be productive in some way, no one complains. And as befits a force that spends most of its time embarked, their hardware is suitably adapted for combat at sea. The pirates' warjacks are all adapted so that a splash of water isn't greeted with a malfunction. Most are developments of jury-rigged labourjacks that were originally designed for service at sea, and most now serve a dual purpose of being able to contribute to the maintenance of a ship while also being effective when battle is joined, both the freebooter and mariner being prime examples of this utility. However, these Pirates of the Broken Coast are, perhaps paradoxically, not the only Pirates of the Broken Coast. They aren't even the only living Pirates of the Broken Coast. They are only the predominant human Pirates of the Broken Coast, plus allies. The Nightmare Empire of Cryx, as the nautical power of West Immoren, typically do boast naval superiority most of the time, and, given the inherent power of the black ships that they can deploy, could even boast naval supremacy, were it not for internal politicking. The sailors of the Nightmare Empire make an eclectic bunch with a, shall we say, healthy combination of alive and undead, Ogryn, Trollkin, human, and Styx's crews. The purpose of all within the Nightmare Empire, though, is to serve the Lich Lords and the Dragonfather, even if their respective end goals sometimes differ. For the Lich Lords are mortal in origin, so they have attitudes and, more importantly, ambitions formed by experiences of life and mortality. Toruk himself only cares for the destruction of all other dragons and draconic beings. Should that coincide with world domination, then even better. As a living god, such a goal is equally worthy. Meanwhile, the Lich Lords each wish to be the greatest among them, and to extend their rule to all of Immoren, and as long as their ambitions do not get in the way of Toruk's purpose for them, he cares not. Thus, strange as it seems, the Cryxian fleets and their crews are generally of vassal status within the Empire, for the Lich Lords typically disdain the existence on and command of ships and fleets, despite their origin. Admiral Scar Ravenmane of the Black Fleet and her colleagues among the other fleets command forces of substantial strength, numbers, and power that many along the coasts of Signar, Ord, and Cador live in perpetual fear of seeing any of their ships on the horizon. But even she, and with her, Korgal of the Slaughter Fleet and Axiara of the Irregular Pirates and Rengrave of the Ghost Fleet, must because there is no choice in the matter, to the Lich Lords. The Lich Lords are, in effect, the rulers of the Nightmare Empire, for they carry out the Dragonfather's will, and as a living god, Toruk cannot fathom the wants, needs, or whims of mortal beings, no matter their status. Nor should he, for his goals are of a loftier nature, and the desire to destroy his wayward progeny will not be diminished until the last is consumed. Therefore, the general governance and immediate tasks of the Empire fall to the Lich Lords. In so saying, there is no lack of appreciation for the pirate's value and necessity. Indeed, when Toruk settled to build a realm of his own within the Shard Islands, the Lich Lords that became his first lieutenants were the pirate kings that once ruled the archipelago. Most saw the wisdom in paying obeisance to the dragon, though some were more foolish in defying him. Now, the Lich Lords, who normally number 12, serve as the Empire's undead ministers, with responsibilities irksomely similar in manner to their living counterparts, if with a more necromantic turn to them. Unsurprisingly, though, one is dedicated to scouring Immoren for draconic lore and conducting incursions into the mainland in efforts to confront and defeat the lesser dragons. As such, the military of Cryx is a somewhat messy affair, given the wildly varying propensities of competing pirate captains and thrall lords, the unwieldy nature of some of the undead warriors, and the nigh uncontrollability of some of the other arms of the Empire's forces. Undoubtedly, in general command are the Lich Lord commanders of the incursions, alongside Lich Lord Scopulus, who commands a permanent force of reserves on the Cryxian homelands. Under them are the aforementioned admirals of Cryx's most important and senior fleets, and at the bottom of the pecking order are the individual captains and commodores of the various pirate ships or flotillas, who are either not powerful enough to challenge the admirals, or who are their vassals outright. Parallel to the fleets is the undead host, the product of the Nightmare Empire's long traditions of necromancy. Legions of undead automatons made from the detritus of battle, tortured souls torn from the void and bound to the recently slain, and an accursed collection of deranged geniuses, godless dead, and doomed tyros run parallel with the fleets. Any equivalence can be a touch troublesome, however, owing to the somewhat shallow chain of command available to them. Thralls, no matter how they are raised, do not have much independence or intelligence for the most part, so they must be commanded by a Scarlock or a Necromancer directly to be of value. Bands of thralls are thus casually thrown into a meat grinder of battle, only to be re-raised mid-battle if a necromancer be skilled enough to do so. So if nothing else, they appreciate the value of recycling their resources to maximum efficiency. If a body is decimated beyond repair, an enemy corpse will do just as well. Necromancers are notoriously tolerant in this way. Thus, to keep the innumerable undead organised, even if the logistics of such a task is admittedly a little simpler, are Iron Liches, Senior Necromancers, and Elder Wraiths, all of whom see to those forces they specialise in or are assigned to by their master. Unsurprisingly, because of a broad lack of explicit seniority among the Lich Lords' vassals, there is a great deal of jostling among them, so many senior commanders end up not occupying their positions for all that long before being deposed by their more ambitious colleagues or subordinates. The Lich Lords themselves are not immune from this gamesmanship either. However, the Lich Lords that regularly take to the field do so as Warcasters, but their power comes not from any Warcaster gifts, but rather the immense innate power that they have from being a Lich Lord blessed by Toruk. This is not to say that Warcasters in the traditional sense are absent from Cryxian ranks, only that other forms of sorcery, some found only within the Nightmare Empire, and the blight-tinged quirks of cortexes of Cryxian manufacture mean that the Lich Lords can command the helljacks of the Empire's necrofactoriums with equal effectiveness and ability as those who came by such positions via means that would be more familiar to Warcasters of other nations. Also, like the other nations of Immoren, the Warcasters do hold special command within the ranks of Cryx's military. But while a Signaran or Khadoran Warcaster may assume command as they see fit, Warcasters are merely a valuable asset in Cryx. The power they wield does, however, give them an advantage over their rivals in climbing the ladder towards command, just another weapon in the tussle for prominence. Special mention needs to be made regarding Cryx's warjacks, or helljacks as is a more suitable name for them, for they can be quite hellish indeed. As a consequence of Cryxian adjustments to the production of the cortex, the application of necrotite as their main fuel source instead of coal, their warcasters' preference for dark magic, and literally everything about the Necrotechs that are responsible for their maintenance, helljacks are markedly more aggressive and bloodthirsty in conduct. The aforementioned Necrotechs are best described as what remains of a mind that was deranged genius in life, now given singular purpose in undeath, necessary to make cortexes that are equally responsive to the commands of the undead as well as the living. And even then, they despair at their apparent self-professed stupidity, looking on hungrily at creations such as Deathjack and Cankerworm, yearning for the secrets of the Librum Mechanicus that would give rise to the perfect Helljack. Consequently, the Necrotech's own search for profane knowledge drives them to tinker, craft, and experiment, no matter the time, no matter the place, and no matter the subject. That a sense of this derangement is, albeit unintentionally, or intentionally, as is sometimes the case, imparted to the machines they help design, construct, and repair is a bit of an understatement. It should come as no surprise that the Seether, that paragon of Cryxian madness, was designed by a master Necrotech who was so lunatic as to be considered thoroughly unhinged, even by his fellow Necrotechs, while, upon his disappearance, his Lich Lord superiors wished there were more of him. And it was the Necrotechs and Lich Lords that developed and refined necrotite, a combination of coal and detritus of battle infused with the residual energy left behind by bloodshed, pain, suffering, and torment. How fitting it is that this tainted fuel burns hotter and longer than normal coal, and that, as it does so, a strange sense of revelling and delighting in that same said bloodshed, pain, suffering, and torment diffuses to the Helljack's cortex, a foul twisting of the concept of alchemical reactants and products. Thus, the Helljacks require a strong leash and a strong mind to keep them under control, but their Warcasters are more than willing to unleash them on the peoples of Immoren. A Helljack with sufficiently developed behavioural traits can be very easily discerned from their mainland counterparts by a distinct habit of committing random acts of violence, often in violation of their controllers' wishes, even though most tend to indulge them in such brutal whims. Of more practical importance, however, like their less necromantically inclined equivalents among the piratical factions, Helljacks come in a number of varieties, many of which are well suited to combat at sea. But while the privateer-adapted labourjacks are well suited to fighting on ships, Cryx tends to employ Helljacks who are equally comfortable fighting beside, or even underneath, a ship as on it. Their ominous arrivals at beachside landings serve as a prelude to an inevitable terror, Accompanying the helljacks are their smaller, but no less belligerent cousins, the bonejacks, each a horror unto themselves and the stuff of nightmares for soldiers of Western Immoren. Cheaply constructed and outfitted with the foulest weapons, bonejacks happily chitter across battlefields, tearing apart anything that moves, whether it be flesh or metal. They might even receive and carry out commands from their Warcaster if they remember where the bonejacks are. And then there are those helljacks that few outside the Nightmare Empire care to speak of, and even fewer have encountered and returned with their body intact. Their minds would be another matter entirely, though. What many on the Immore's mainland fear is that Toruk should tire of the machinations of men that interfere with his hunt for the other dragons, and unleash all of Cryx's forces on the Iron Kingdoms, for it has been a long time since the armies of the Nightmare Empire have marched and its fleets sailed in unison. Were it not for the infernal invasion, there is not a king or lord who would welcome the sight of the Dragonfather's fully assembled hosts arriving in Immoren.